episode 2, and you know we're right in the thick of we got the first round of the college football playoffs out of the way. We got round 2 coming up. We're also in the thick of finishing up the NFL regular season, and a lot going on. Pieces are starting to fall into place. Looks like the major piece isn't going to be settled until Sunday night. Lions Vikings got flexed to that Sunday night matchup. This is kind of unbelievable.
Yeah.
Lions and Niners haven't played yet tonight, so they're going to be playing later on tonight. And it's a meaningless game. You know, I
Well,
saw I saw earlier where it said that of course Dan Campbell, being in true Dan Campbell fashion, said, hey, we're playing games. We're
yeah.
playing games just like we always do. That's not surprising at all, though, right?
I mean, no, not at all. But I don't think that it's a meaningless game. Totally. Obviously, it's completely different circumstances, but we still are bitter for getting knocked out of the NFC Championship last year when we had that game won, and we kind of choked it away in the second half. So that still hurts. It still stings. Being in that stadium again. Um, Obviously, the Niners are eliminated from the playoffs. There's nothing at stake. Um, you know, but just that feel of playing the
Kittle already
Niners.
said, Kittle already said we know the Lions are salty from
Yeah,
what happened last year.
right.
They're
Yeah,
gonna want to beat us by 30.
right.
I
And I
say that
think
he
we're
was a
going
little bit
to.
on the low end
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
Knowing Dan Campbell and Brad Johnson,
Ben Johnson.
they're yeah, there's no taking your foot off the gas and in those kinds of things.
No.
Obviously, if we were in a situation to where the game against Minnesota didn't matter, then Hooker would play, but still they would be running the sets and doing everything and going all
Yeah.
in. But yeah, so that's what we're looking at. I mean, that one's it's all going to come down to that one. What's going to happen. And I mean, the Lions, of course, in true Lions fashion, you have the dream season and everything else, and then all of a sudden 22 players on the IR. And we're limping to the finish line
Yeah.
here.
We're
And
not only limping to the finish line, but Sam Darnold stands in our way. I mean, if you would have told me, at the beginning of the season that we were going to have the best record in franchise history and have a game to play that would determine if we were a 1 seed or a 5 seed, and it was against the Vikings and Sam Darnold, I would have called you crazy. I would have said you don't watch football and you don't know what you're talking about. That sounds like kind of like a simulated Madden season. Um, but listen, it is what it is. As much as I can't stand the Vikings, you got to give respect to them. I mean, what they've been able to do this year, they win games, man.
yeah,
So, hey, it's gonna be a tough one. Obviously, we're Lions fans. We expect to win this game, but if we don't, that one's gonna hurt a lot.
and that's the thing about it. I mean, you're looking at it. Okay, so Lions. Let's say Lions beat the Niners because we know Niners have had a bad season. They're reeling and everything else, and we've got that revenge factor,
Right.
going on and everything else. So now you look at it and you say, okay, you've got two teams at 14-2 playing, and
Yeah.
the winner gets the 1 seed and home field throughout, and then the loser right now it looks like goes to Tampa
Yeah.
at 14 wins. You're gonna have a
Hmm.
14-win team potentially uh, going on the road in the first round of the playoffs. And who I mean, maybe is I don't like was Tampa's got 9 wins right now.
Yeah, so
Um,
Tampa's got 9 wins right now. They just took control of the NFC South back over with Atlanta falling to Washington last
which was
night
a
in
great game, by
overtime.
the way. I mean,
Crazy
I'm going to
game.
tell you,
But that just clinched a playoff berth for Washington. So the seeding is starting to fall into place here. Lot less spots coming up as of right now. Green Bay's the 7th seed, which I'm pretty sure they clinched a playoff berth as well. So I think that
Yep.
the NFC is locked. The only thing that is not locked is the AFC. The Bengals can still
NFC's
hop in
not
there.
NFC's not locked yet. Um, Atlanta still has an outside chance of overtaking the Buccaneers. If Atlanta wins the last game and Buccaneers lose, then Atlanta, with some other tiebreaker stuff going on, they have a shot.
So
Um,
that's the only difference would be
that's the
Atlanta
only
and
difference.
Tampa. Every
Outside of
other
that,
team
I
is
mean, the
locked in.
seeds and all that. Well, then obviously the seed with the last game of
Right.
the year being the big one going in. But that's what it's looking right now.
Yeah.
So
So yeah, I mean, we unfortunately, I would hate for it to happen, but if we do fall to Minnesota next week, we're either going to Tampa or to LA
to Atlanta.
or to Tampa or to Atlanta. I mean,
Yeah,
because
because that would
that'll
be
end
the
up being
the worst record of
yeah.
the conference
I'd rather go
winners.
to Atlanta, honestly, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because we're gonna beat Minnesota, and we're gonna let our guys rest. Anzalone will be back on defensive side of the ball there, and we'll have home field advantage. Now we go to the AFC here. Obviously, Kansas City locked down the 1 seed on Christmas Day.
And how do they
Buffalo,
keep winning, man?
yeah,
I mean,
that in
all these
itself
close
is
games, they just kind of figure a way. You get blocked field goals, you get pass
yeah.
interferences, you get all these, these kinds of crazy things, and they just, you feel like the luck has got to run out at some point with them. They're not like winning these games in convincing fashion. I mean, I mean, they've only got one loss.
Right, and
I
that's to
mean, their
Buffalo,
record is
right?
what it is, but each one of these games, it's like, man,
The one,
how is that going to continue on into the playoffs? But they're going to be at home.
yeah.
That's
I mean,
that's on their side too. So it's a crazy thing. I mean, I look at it and I see Buffalo as probably the best team over there, but Buffalo having to go on the road against the that Kansas City team with
we've
Taylor
yeah.
Swift sitting there doing whatever
We've seen
magic
that
she got
episode.
going on.
We've
I
already
mean,
seen that
it
episode.
yeah.
Buffalo in Kansas City. I mean, we've already seen that episode. It's almost every year now that those two play in the divisional or the AFC Championship. It's been that
Don't forget
way.
about Baltimore though, too. I mean,
No, that's what I'm saying. You
Baltimore.
factor out Baltimore. They look terrible on Christmas Day, but Houston, they CJ Stroud's got to straighten up a little bit. Obviously, losing Tank Dell and Nico Collins on that offensive side of the ball was huge. For the worse for Houston. You still got Joe Mixon, you still got Nico Collins, but and then you've got Pittsburgh that is right now a 5 seed. They have their ups and downs. I think they started out really strong with Fields, and then Wilson came in and continued what Fields started, and they just kept winning and winning. But they've kind of been dealt a bad hand with the way that their season has played out. Because I mean they've got a tough
That
schedule here.
schedule, I mean, the
Yeah,
schedule at the end of the year was kind of ridiculous with the Christmas games and all that
yeah,
stuff. And
yep,
I think the NFL's got to look at that and be like, this is not good. It doesn't make, especially when you've got teams fighting for seeding and playoff
right.
spots down the stretch, and you're like, oh, I've got to turn around and play again in 3 or 4 days. I mean, it
It
just doesn't make
was.
any sense.
It ended up being for all four of those teams: Houston, Baltimore, Kansas City, Pittsburgh. It was 3 games in 11 days for all four of them.
Yeah,
I mean
that's silly.
yeah,
It is. It just doesn't
yeah,
make any sense. So I got to look at that. But and that obviously it didn't affect Kansas City because Kansas City
yeah,
did what they did. It didn't
yeah.
affect Baltimore. They played well against Houston. But it looked. I mean, it looked like it affected Pittsburgh when they were playing Kansas City,
It
right?
did.
Like they
Yeah,
they they didn't look like the same team, but we'll see. I mean, Tomlin, I mean, he is the best coach that there
yeah,
is. Like, I
right.
mean, just chalk him up for a playoff spot every single year. How do they do it? They just retool and refuel guys. And it's unbelievable. He just does it incredible.
He
And I
he
don't think he
does
gets enough respect. He doesn't get
now.
nearly enough. Everybody wants to talk about all these other guys. Tomlin just is in there day in, day out, and he's got his team in the playoffs. And it's a team you don't want to play in the playoffs.
No,
Whether
no.
you think they can make a run to the Super Bowl or not, any given day in the playoffs, that's one of the last teams that you want to see, no matter what their season looked like.
Right. And they are the most experienced team every season in the playoffs. Think about Mike Tomlin hasn't had a losing record since he's been the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, that's just
It's crazy.
it is crazy. So
Yeah.
yeah, always got to watch out for them. And then right now that sixth seed would be the Chargers in the hunt, Denver, Miami, and Cincinnati all still alive in that
Cincinnati needs a lot
AFC.
of help. They
Yeah.
need like three teams to lose or
Kansas City being one of them. And now Kansas City's already clinched the one seed. Their last game of the year is against
Mahomes is
Denver.
banged up. He's
So,
not going to play.
if Denver beats Kansas City, Cincinnati's out.
Yep.
And then it would be up to Denver and the Chargers there, which they're in the same division.
Chargers
So,
are in. Chargers are in. It's they clinched it with that win. That big
oh,
win
against
over
New
New
England,
England.
right,
They
right,
beat them by 100. New England's fallen on hard times, man. They it's tough. It's tough there, but but so yeah, so you got that situation going
yeah.
on where Cincinnati's got that outside chance, but at
Same
the end of
with
the day, I mean,
Miami.
it comes down to three teams over there, right? Like it
Yeah,
comes down to Kansas City, it comes down to Buffalo, and it comes down to Baltimore. Pittsburgh on the outside might be able to make a run, but I think it comes down to those three teams. I like Buffalo just because of the fact that that team's so solid. They put up points. I mean, Josh Allen is
mhm,
unbelievable. Uh, You know, Baltimore's there, but there's just something about Baltimore. I mean,
right.
it's the way that they laid an egg in the playoffs last year kind of still doesn't sit right with me. And then again, like I said, Kansas City, I mean, their luck has got to run out at some point, and
Yeah, well, you would think.
it's gonna if it runs out in the playoffs, then they're done. So
I feel like Kansas City's luck will run out in the Super Bowl. I think that, listen, I mean, Kansas City and Buffalo have played each other in the playoffs so many times, and Kansas City has the better of Buffalo. But yes, Buffalo won this year, in Orchard Park there, but they got to go to Arrowhead in the playoffs again. I just feel like we're gonna be rewatching the same song and dance, And then Baltimore, I think they're a more complete team now, adding Derrick Henry there on offense. But again, you're right. I think that something's off there. Something doesn't feel confident for me to sit here and say Baltimore. So and yes, I do think it's down to those three teams, but it's hard to bet against Kansas City. It is. As much as I hate to say
yeah.
I'd be a fool to not sit here and start preparing for the realization that they're probably gonna go back to the Super Bowl.
Well, I'll be a
Do I
fool.
think they
I'll
win
go
it?
ahead.
No.
I'll go ahead and call. I'm gonna call Buffalo. I think it's their time. Um, so that's where I'm going on that side. We come back over to the NFC again, and it's again, it all comes down to what happens next Sunday night when when Minnesota comes into Detroit and who wins that game, who gets home. I mean, let's talk about Sam Darnold, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
he comes in, he's just trying to latch onto a team. It was almost like a foregone conclusion that they were going to roll out JJ McCarthy as their
Yeah.
quarterback and everything else. The injury, he's out for the year and all this stuff. And they're like, well, it's a good thing we got Sam Darnold because at least he's a veteran. Maybe he can win us some games and we'll see what happens. If we're in the hunt, we'll add some pieces or stuff like
Yeah.
that. And then the guy has just this a career year and has
Yeah.
played the best football. I mean, you love to see it, a guy doing something like that when he gets, he's drafted, number one, and he's just I mean, he was a bust. There's
Yeah.
no other way to put it other than the fact that he was a bust coming out of college, and then he's bounced around, hung around, and everything like that, and now he's having this year. But the question is, all that being said, what do the Vikings do? Because he was only on a 1 year deal.
Mhm.
How do you have if they get the one seed and make a run at the Super Bowl? how do you say, well, you know what, we're thanks for your service, but we've got a JJ McCarthy who's completely unproven
Mhm.
in every aspect of everything. And the only upside of JJ McCarthy was his athletic ability. The guy could run and everything else. And then he has the knee injury. What's he going to be like coming? So how do you tell Sam Darnold we're not going to bring you back in that type
Right.
of an situation, especially when you saw them how the team rallied around him in the locker room and it, loves the guy and stuff like that. So what I mean, what do you do at the end of the year?
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a tough situation, but let's not forget we've seen this before, right? With Case Keenum in Minnesota, and he took them to the NFC Championship in Philly, right? And then was gone the next year. I mean, even Nick Foles in Philly
Won
took
a
him,
Super
won the
Bowl.
Super Bowl, and was gone. So,
Yeah.
we see these kind of things all the time. I agree with it? No, I think if you're Minnesota, how in the hell do you move on from Sam Darnold? After this year, especially like you said, if they do end up getting that one seed, winning the North, and making a run. But I do think that regardless if Minnesota gets that one seed or not, I still think it's going to be Detroit, Philly, and Minnesota are going to be the three teams in the NFC that you're looking at. I don't think the Rams make much noise here. Washington, I like what they're doing down there. I think Jaden Daniels is terrific, but I don't see them, making a run. And then of course, Green Bay, every big game they've played in this year, they lost, right?
Yeah.
Detroit, Minnesota, Philly, they lost them all. So I don't see Green Bay getting far either. So I think those three are your teams in the NFC. Obviously, we're biased, so we're gonna sit here and say Detroit makes it to the Super Bowl and wins the whole thing. But I think that Philly and Minnesota give us a run for our money, and of course, our injuries too. We have the most injuries on an active NFL roster in the league right now. So I think that we'll see who we can get back and who we can't, and who steps up. Dan Campbell's preached the next man up mentality, and we've done a great job of, I think, riding that out and finding guys that have stepped up. I mean, like, we sit here and we watch the game, and we see dudes out there. We're like, I don't even know who that dude is, but he's out there making plays. And I think, it's the whole Dan Campbell experience really. But yeah, I think with those three teams being there, obviously I'm going to say Lions. I don't know if you're going to say Lions. I imagine you will, but um,
It really, it's tough. It's tough to, it's tough to pick against them because of, like you said, it is next man up, and what this coaching staff has done and the players that have bought into the environment and the culture and everything else that's going on there. And it doesn't matter who it is, right? Like, I mean, pulling guys off of practice squads from all over the league, and they're coming in and they're making plays. I mean, whether they know that, listen, all I got to do is make one play at one time in the game and I can do that. You know what I mean? And so you've got guys with that mentality, like, I'm going to be that guy at that moment. And regardless of if I was on Jacksonville's practice squad last week or not, you know,
right,
and so it's hard when it reminds me, I'm not drawing comparisons here as saying that they're like the Patriots and stuff like that. Obviously, listen, but what I will say is the one parallel that I'll make is that it's the culture and the system as opposed to specifically built around certain players. So what they did is just like what New England did, Belichick and them, they had their system. And when they brought in players and they drafted players and everything else, they got guys that fit the system and what they wanted to do exactly. And so then that's why when they had injuries, there wasn't really that much of a drop off, because again, it was next guy up, because it was just, okay, I'm going to do the same thing in the same
mhm,
role that I'm filling, rather than trying to, replace a Hall of Famer, kind of a thing. So that's the one parallel that I'll draw with all these injuries and what we're seeing. Plus, you don't know. I mean, we're talking about Anzalone maybe coming back. I mean, Hutch is saying that he'll play for the Super Bowl, but I
right,
mean, that's obviously a long way off and things like that. But these kinds of things, getting certain people back and some people back, and then now, we don't know what's going on with Montgomery. Is he going to be available for the playoffs or not? Those kinds of things. So, that's the big question mark, right? Like, how much can we withstand? And again, winning that and getting that first round bye and being at home and everything else. I mean, that would be huge to overcome these kinds of injuries and those kinds of things. So yeah,
Hmm.
I can it happen? Yes, it can. Do I want it to happen? Yes, I do. And I had picked them as they started playing. I mean, from the end of last season, I was like, you know what, they're gonna evolve. They have done nothing but evolve with Dan Campbell. So I don't see why they wouldn't continue to do that. So I had them. I'm not going to jump off the bandwagon being that pick. My pick is one of the the most wanted Super Bowls in the history of America of Lions versus Bills. Um, but you're right. I mean, Minnesota is I yeah, Minnesota. It's tough to beat a team twice. It's tough to beat a team three times, and you could potentially have to do that. And Philly is look. Philly's got talent all over the field. They're good. They're strong, and that's it will have to see how things kind of play out and stuff like that. I mean, Washington can upset somebody. Green
Hmm.
Bay can upset somebody. So if two of the three big boys get knocked out early because of one of these having to play one of these teams that you don't want to play, then it's like a free sailing for
Yeah.
the other one to go through. But and hopefully that the stars align and that kind of happens
Yeah.
for the
Right.
Lions in the playoffs.
Right.
It would kind of be poetic justice after all the bad luck that they've had with all the injuries and things like that. But that's who I got. I got
Yeah.
America's Super Bowl. I got Lions, Bills. That's what I'm looking forward to seeing, and I think that would be a good one.
Yeah. I think that would be outstanding too. Obviously nobody wants to see Kansas City back in it except for Chiefs fans. I think obviously America just loves Buffalo. It's just one of those teams. Unless you're a Jets fan, like well, it's the Bills. I mean,
I
let's
feel like
go
Buffalo and Detroit
Buffalo.
are kind of
Yeah,
like the same types of cities, the same
yeah,
types of blue collar, just
yeah,
the team, the players on the team, they're just like that. That I think it's something that everybody in the country can get behind and stuff like that. I will say this, one of the things that we talk about is what have the Lions been able to do and all these other kind of things. I saw this thing where it said, there's the of the biggest blowouts that have happened. I mean, the Lions can put up points. I mean, Brad Johnson's been unbelievable. Who knows? I mean, he probably, if he's going to be the Bears coach next year and things like that. But the guy is creative, and this is one of the advantages, even with the injuries that we have. Of the biggest blowouts this year, the Lions have the top three.
yeah. The top
They
three.
beat Jacksonville by 46 points. They
Hmm.
beat Tennessee by 38 points. They beat the Cowboys by 38
Yep.
points. Now you say, oh, it's Jacksonville, Tennessee, and it's the Cowboys, but every you have to play who's on your and you have to beat them, and you beat them in convincing fashion. If you're supposed to beat them by a lot, then beat them by a lot, and that's what they've done. And so it's interesting. And then the fourth one is Buffalo.
Yep.
Buffalo beat Jacksonville by 37. So and when they played against each other, it was a 42-41 game.
It was yeah, 45, 42, or 48, 45, something like that. The point is
yeah.
they combined put up 90 points. And yeah, so I mean that's the thing too. And Buffalo had, when I was looking at the list, though, the one difference, when I was looking at the list of injuries in the NFL, Buffalo has the least injuries on the starting lineup in the NFL. Um, and I'm not taking anything away from Buffalo. Obviously, I'm not sitting here saying, "Oh, they had their starting lineup and they only beat us by way." Because listen, we came back and got some garbage
Well, in
touchdowns
that
late. They
game
they
though.
manhandled us to start the game. They really did. They came in and they punched us in the mouth, like Coach Campbell said. We got some garbage points late to make that score a little closer, but it was a wake up call that we needed.
Mhm.
Obviously, listen, this is the game. We can sit here and say, "Oh, well, if we had these injuries, and well, if we would have just made that one field goal, or if we would have got that first down, we would have scored on that." We could sit there and do this all day long, right? I mean, we're Lions fans. Listen, we've been doing it for as long as we can remember. If only we would have just had this
Yeah.
one,
Oh, this play here,
this and
this
that, and
play
this and that,
here, we would
right?
have been 9-7. We would have made the
Right.
playoffs, and
Yeah, exactly. And then, but you sit there and you talk about, like you mentioned those victory margins and who put up the most points. Listen, yeah, you like you said, people are gonna sit there and say, oh, well, it's Tennessee and it's Jacksonville and it's listen, it's still the NFL, right? And Dan Campbell says it all the time. It is hard to win in this league. And not only is it hard to win in this league, but when you're putting up 50 points in an NFL, I mean, listen, that's college stuff. 50 points.
That most games in the NFL with 40 plus points, the Lions with 5, then Washington, Buffalo, and Baltimore each had 3.
Yeah.
So I mean that's the thing. That's why I'm saying, like, injuries or whatever and all these different kinds of things and all that stuff. It's a system. It's people buying in. It's the coaches. It's the mentality and those kinds of things. And I will say, just to add one point, when the Lions did play Buffalo, while they don't have anybody on the injured reserve or whatever, in that game, 3 of their starters were
Yeah.
out on the
Yeah.
secondary. So,
Yeah.
that's, while we were battling all of our IRs and all that other kind of stuff, and that too, Buffalo for that game,
Mm-hmm.
had it, and it was
Yeah.
all in the secondary. So,
Yeah.
it was kind of, but that's why I would kind of love to see, let's get another chance. Let's get healthy. Let's get it, and let's get it to the Super Bowl. I mean, who wouldn't want to see another 40, something
Oh,
point game in the
shootout.
Super
Yeah.
Bowl,
Oh, it'd be
shootout, having a
outstanding.
good time, and, with two teams that have never won it, and one team that's never even been. So,
Yeah.
that would be fantastic.
It would
So
be.
hopefully get a Lions win tonight. Lions win against Minnesota, and then you rest up.
Yeah. You rest up. We just spent the better half of the last, 5 minutes talking about injuries. So, I mean, if any team needs a bye week, it's us. It really is. And of course, obviously, every team would love a bye week, right? I'm not sitting here trying to discredit other teams in the NFL, but just look at the numbers, man. I mean, we have the most injuries on an active roster in the whole entire league, and
Well,
it's not even
and
close.
IR, yeah,
And it's not, and
IR,
it's
yeah,
IR, and it's not even
22 guys on
close.
IR. It's unbelievable.
Right.
Um,
So I understand, right? Obviously people can sit there and say, well, every team has injuries as part of the game, blah, blah. I understand that. But when I'm showing you the numbers, we have the most players on IR, I just think, listen, if I hate the Green Bay Packers, if they had 22 players on IR, I'd say they'd be most deserving of a bye week. That's just how it is, right? It just so happens that we're the team that fits that narrative right now. So, you can come at me all you want and sit here and say, stop complaining. But I mean, guys, the best season that the Lions have had in the history of its franchise. And we're looking at a possible 5 seed
with
with 14
14,
wins. I mean, listen, I
that's
think
and
I
that's
think we can
ridiculous.
I think we could express some frustration here, right? I mean,
And,
but
we'll sit there and say, look at, after all the
Lions
years and everything like that, that would be a very Lions thing to
thing.
do.
Yep. It
Uh,
would be
you
the
know,
most Lions thing to happen
yeah.
ever.
And
But, you
but
know,
before we move off of the NFL and get into college football, I want to bring one thing. So we were watching that game last night, that Washington Atlanta game. 2 young quarterbacks. I mean, Penix is finally getting his shot and everything else. It was a great game, awesome game. Down the thing. I want to tell you, I hate NFL's overtime rules. I
yeah.
hate them. I hate them, and
Mhm.
Washington benefited from it. And
They did.
it doesn't take much of a tweak to fix it. Like, I'm not saying go to the college
Right. Because
way
I think
of
that the college is
starting
a
at
little
25, and I
yeah.
I wouldn't want to do that in the NFL. Wouldn't
No.
want to do that in the NFL. The change that I would make is, once Washington drove down the field and scored a touchdown, instead of that being the game, then Atlanta should get the ball. Atlanta should get the ball, and look, they know they have to score a touchdown, right? And if they so 4 downs, 4 downs, 4 downs, they got to go. If they don't get a first down, then the game's over. At
Right.
least they
But
had their
they
shot,
they got a
right?
shot,
Like,
right.
and so, and then the situation, they do go down and score. Like, if first team scores, Washington was to score first, and Atlanta comes down and scores. Now it's next score wins.
Right.
Okay.
And then
And
you
and
can do field
or
goals.
if Washington had been forced to kick a field goal there, then Atlanta, gets done, and then it's the same type of a thing. You're not really changing much, other than you're adding the one possession after the first scored touchdown, which I think everybody wants, right? Because I mean, we saw that. What was it? The playoffs, Kansas City and Buffalo. We talk
Right.
about that, right? Like
Yeah.
Kansas
I mean,
City
we
and
talk about it all
Buffalo.
the
It
time.
was once Kansas City won the toss. It was one of the greatest games of all time. They
Mhm.
were going back and forth and everything else. Once Kansas City won the toss, we knew the game was over.
Yeah.
And we didn't get to
And
see Josh Allen with the ball in overtime, giving his team a chance. And so it frustrates me. And what happens if this is what the Super Bowl comes down to, a coin flip? If we get the Lions and it's 44-44, Lions in Buffalo, 44, one of the greatest games in the history of all times, and you go into the overtime, and it's all comes down to the Super Bowl, comes down to the guy in the striped shirt flipping a coin, and did the wind move it and all this other bullshit and stuff like that. No, I don't want that to determine a game. And the NFL needs to, I understand not wanting to drag these games out, not wanting to, extend them and injuries. I mean, we're always up all this, but they're adding games. It's 17-game
yeah,
season now, talking about wanting to add 18. You know what? Why can't we just add one more possession to an overtime game, which doesn't happen every single week? It's just, it infuriates me. But watching that, and I was talking to you about it last night, and I'm like, I hate it. It's irritating. Yeah, obviously, when you're the team that wins, it feels good, but it just sucks because it was so good going down the stretch. That game was, it was so
it
good,
was.
back
No, it
and
was.
forth.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you as far as, yeah, add another possession, right? Like you mentioned, right, Josh Allen. Okay, yes, that playoff game, right? And Josh Allen was fuming. He's like, we lost a game because of a coin toss, and it is frustrating. I mean, we saw earlier this season when Kansas City and Tampa Bay went into overtime, and when Kansas City won the coin toss, we saw Baker Mayfield's reaction. I mean, he knew. He's like, well, and listen, I understand, you got your people out there that will just play defense, get a stop. I get that. But football is not only is it a game of inches, but it's a game of momentum. And it's when a team is hot, like overtime happens because both teams have answers to each other. And we didn't have enough time in regulation to figure it out, right? So I agree. I think both teams should get a possession. And yes, we're not saying do it like college where they both start at the 25 and then they both score 100 and we get into 37 overtimes. And I'm not saying that, right? I'm saying they both get a possession. And yeah, if they don't score, well, at least they had a chance. And then you could say they had they had a chance on defense to get a stop, and then they had a chance on offense to score. So they
Because
had as
and
many
that's the thing too,
opportunities as
and we're not.
possible.
And the time I had said maybe bump it to 15, you said no, let's keep it at 10. I'm fine keeping it at 10. And because once Washington scored and there was 2:25 left on the clock, you're trying to tell me that I mean, what kind of TV would that have been, and the
Right.
entertainment would
Oh,
have been to see Atlanta get the ball with 2 minutes and 25 seconds, needing to score a touchdown to extend the game? Or
oh
it
yeah.
wouldn't have extended the game because it probably would have had to do it as time was running out, and it would have ended as a tie and stuff like that. But I mean, at least, I mean, that's like, I
I
mean, come
also,
on,
I
you
mean, I
know.
also don't think that game should end in ties either. I know obviously they don't do it in the playoffs, or advance in games, tournament games or whatever. Listen, I personally think no game should end in a tie, right? I think
So
so.
how do
For
you do it? Do you
example,
give him a do you give him another do you give him another overtime period? I mean, that's
no, I
that's
think you
brutal.
do.
Or do you go to, like, okay, we're gonna put our kickers out there, and we're gonna start with whoever misses first, start at the
No, I
20, and then
mean
at the
that.
30, and then at the 40.
I think
Like a
that would.
shootout in hockey with
I think,
kickers.
yeah, I think that would be pretty cool. I wouldn't be completely opposed to it, but I think a more reasonable thing would just be adding 3 to 5 more minutes.
But then, I mean, the problem I have with that is, I mean, 3 to 5. I mean, we saw okay with the 10 minute. I mean, they moved down the field. They scored with 2 minutes and 25 seconds left. I mean, they took almost 8 minutes off the clock. So, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, but they also didn't have as much
adding a few
urgency.
more minutes, I mean, adds one possession for one team, and then who gets that possession?
Okay. Okay.
That's the
So
only
then
thing I
instead
don't
of
I don't like.
Okay, so then instead of doing that, if they play out a full 10 minutes with both teams getting a possession and they do end up tying it and time expires, instead of adding more time, Then we can switch to the whole college. Start at the
No,
25, each gets a possession.
no, I like my kicker. I like my kicker. What you do, you get your kicker out there and you put it all on your kicker at that point. You said, look, all you other guys couldn't figure this out. You had 70 minutes to figure this out and you couldn't do it. So you know what? Let's put it on the kickers. And then what you do is you start at the 20-yard line and each one kicks and whoever makes and misses or whatever. And then you keep moving back 10 yards until you got one that made it and one that didn't. And then if they both miss it at 50, then guess what? Now we're bringing the punters out there to do it. And we're going to run
Okay.
the same thing again because,
Yeah. We
that
were
then you get
bring
it.
the punters out there.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Pat
who punts
McAfee
the
would be on
longest?
me on that one. He would be
Yeah,
behind me for
yeah.
sure on
I'll
that
tell you
one. He'd
what,
be like, you know what?
you never want to
Or
get
you know
into an
what?
overtime
Listen,
with
at the end of
Lions.
at the end of it, you can't settle it. Then you draw the home team gets a chance. You draw a ticket and you bring somebody out from the crowd and you set them up. And if they make it, then the home team wins. And if they miss it, then the visiting team wins. And
Well, dude,
that's the
that's
way
not
you settle
fair.
it if you're still tied after a thing. And then you know
You
what?
can't.
Like
You know what though? But what? Okay, what happens if you're the ticket they call, dude? You're not kicking a field goal.
I'm kicking it, and I'll tell you what.
We
Like I've
lost.
watched
No, I'm gonna tell
college
you right
game
now.
day, these dudes, and I could kick it.
You can't kick it.
I
I
could
will
kick
be.
it.
I'll tell you what. I'll let you guys know right now that if this were to happen and he were to be the guy to kick it, he'd immediately be taken out on a cart. He'd be going
I
straight to
would
the
listen.
hospital.
I would have myself in shape if I knew that there was a potential for a game-winning field goal in the Super Bowl for the Lions and everything else. You better believe I would
Okay,
be
well
in
then
shape.
okay, so hold on. Super Bowl, there's no
No,
home
no,
team.
no. This is just regular season though. But
Okay, okay. Yeah.
to get us a one seed, it's Minnesota next week,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I section 131, row 440, seat 12. Here comes Eric Schwartz out here to
The-
kick a 30-yard field goal.
You're pulling
Telling you,
every muscle in your lower half.
it would be worth it. I'm on a stretcher.
Yeah, you're on your stretcher with your arms up.
Mike Utley,
Yeah,
thumbs
doing
up.
the thumbs up. That would be, hey, I'll tell you what.
That's
That's like
TV right
that's
there.
a
That's
Family Guy
entertainment.
episode.
NFL, listen, Goodell, I'm calling you. And we're going to figure this out. We're going to set it up. If we go, we're going to add a possession to the overtime. And then if we're still tied, we're drawing a ticket from the crowd. And, it's the home team wins or the if they miss it, then the road team wins. So that's the way
And
we're going to
yeah,
settle it from now on.
and to picture that, just watch College Game Day with the McAfee kick. That's what it would be. That's what it
It'd
would
be
be. I'm all
amazing.
for it, right? Maybe we try it. Maybe we try it in the UFL first.
There's two. Yeah, we could try it in the UFL.
Try it in the UFL
I mean, look
first.
at Jake Bates. Essentially, that's what
saying,
happened.
It happened. Yeah,
Jake Bates
quite literally,
was selling bricks.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you
he's the
get?
greatest
Like a brick
ever.
salesman? Who's selling bricks? Like, if I need a brick, I'm going to go get a brick. I don't need somebody to sell me on bricks. Like, hey, you're missing a brick. You should probably buy a brick. No, I know that I'm missing a brick. So, like, if you're a brick salesman, and then now all of a sudden you're kicking, and it's like, oh, okay. What was he practicing kicking bricks? That's why he can boot the ball.
Ball. Maybe he was
hey,
doing that.
you get a guy from the UFL. Let's do it. Let's try it this spring, summer.
Okay. This is what we're doing.
Let's try it in the UFL, and then we will move it into the NFL for next year. And then that's how we're going to settle regular season games that end in an overtime tie.
I like that. I think this is a great plan, guys. We're going to start the petition. We'll have a link in the description. It's going to be a Google Doc. Go ahead and sign yes or no. And then it's going to be off to the suits and ties in the NFL and the UFL. And we're going to get this ball rolling. But all right, there. Enough of that. We'll transition here into college football, round 2 of the playoffs. We're going to take a little break and we'll get going. Talked about the NFL, talked about the playoffs and the possible seeding going on. While we're on the topic of playoffs and seeding, the college football playoff is fully in effect. The first round has concluded. We are getting ready to start the second round on New Year's Eve with Penn State and Boise State. But let's recap. The first round. Obviously, we're mentioning Penn State and Boise State. Um, Penn State blew out SMU. Notre Dame blew out Indiana. Ohio State blew out your Volunteers. And, you know, what was the other game?
Texas,
Oh, yeah, Texas blew
the
out
score
Clemson.
looked a little bit closer than it was, but Texas blew out Clemson. Four blowouts. Let's take a breath. Okay. I mean, when we had four teams,
Yeah.
we had blowouts, right? And we were talking about the difference between 4 and 5 as to who should be or whatever and things like that. And so now you're talking about, you know, I mean, you have blowouts in college football. You have blowouts in pro. I mean, how many Super Bowls have we watched that were blowouts? How many championship games have we watched that were blow? I mean, it happens. Okay. And NCAA tournament, like everybody goes through the NCAA tournament, and then the championship game is a blowout and things like that. So let's not say, oh, okay, whatever. However, I will say that we do need to take a look at how we're doing the seating, and there's already been talk about like the being changed around or whatever. But Penn State, we knew SMU, going into Happy Valley and the whiteout and all that other kind of stuff, that it was going to be tough. And
Yeah.
the moment, I
And
felt
that was
bad
a
for the
noon
kid.
kickoff, too. That was
Yeah,
a noon kickoff. Imagine had that have been one of the later games.
yeah.
You might have seen even more of a blowout.
Right. And I mean, I felt bad for the kid, the SMU
Yeah.
quarterback, and he didn't have his best day. The moment was, and he said the lights were too bright,
I mean,
or to paraphrase him or
listen,
whatever.
when you commit to go to SMU, you don't picture yourself in those type of situations. You just don't. And you got to reason with yourself, right? I mean,
Yeah.
do you think when he signed to go to SMU that he imagined being in that situation? Probably not.
But the kid, I look, he kept competing even though things were not going. I mean, he was
Yeah.
competing, and he's going to be better for it moving forward. Obviously never been in an environment like that before and whatever, and that. But so that was that one. The Battle of Indiana, where it was
Yeah.
Notre Dame and Indiana, and Signetti, and talking, oh, I win games, that's what I do, Google me, it was like, but if Freeman's got it, I mean, he has built a team. I mean, they had that stumble against Northern Illinois week 2, and
Yeah. And I think that's all it was just a little stumble, just a little, trap game that they overlooked a little bit. But
and
yeah,
you
you're
can't
right.
sleep on the MAC. I mean,
No,
what
I
I mean,
mean,
look at
let me tell you
look at
something.
what Miami of Ohio did. You got these. I mean, the MAC teams.
I mean,
Toledo is out
the
there.
Toledo Rockets in 7 overtimes, bringing it to the ACC and getting the win. I'm going to tell you something. Listen, MAC football is it's where it's
I
at,
mean, MAC
right? I
football
mean,
is tough. I mean,
yeah,
it's tough. So, so yeah, so they had that stumble. They play Indiana, and in Indiana, the only game that they played that had mattered all year long was Ohio State, and they had the first half was a good battle, but then they couldn't hang,
mm,
so what should Indiana, what should they have been there or whatever? I mean, their record was what they were. They had one loss, and I don't have a problem with them being in. Because what are you going to do? You're going to take a 3-loss Alabama over a one loss. I mean, they're Big Ten, SEC. It
yeah.
was fine by
I
me.
mean, again, and it's a whole nother conversation, right?
Yeah,
Because obviously we think the SEC is clearly the most competitive conference in college football. I'd like to say second would be the Big Ten, but I really, to be honest with you, I don't know. I really don't know.
but then again, you want to talk about the SEC, and you talk about, well, okay, let's talk about the game that
It's true.
was the game, and it was Ohio State and Tennessee, and I got to tell you, I mean, Tennessee got punched in the mouth, and they got punched in the mouth right away. I said, the biggest frustration about it was, you know, where was that Ohio State team the 2 weeks prior?
You're telling me.
Against Michigan, and it was a completely different team, a completely different game plan that they had. I mean, and that was We could go on a whole thing about Ryan Day and all this
Yeah.
other stuff, and the whole Herb Street and Shannon Sharp deal and all that other kind of stuff. Whatever. It's like, stop
Yeah.
being so soft, Shannon. But
Right.
anyway, look, because look, Shannon, I'm right there with you. I made a bad call on that one, and I'll eat it. Yeah, I was wrong. I thought Tennessee was ready. Tennessee was not ready. Tennessee was not ready for that Ohio State team. But I think the frustrating part about it is that Ohio State team is the best. The team that showed up for that game and played that game is the best team in the country.
Correct.
But
That's what's
why
frustrating because we
why
don't
does
know
that
if we're
team only show up for a half at a time,
Mhm.
or
Or
not
for
at
a game
all?
or
Yeah,
just a game, right?
yeah.
Um, and listen, the only undefeated team in college football, Oregon, Ohio State came into Eugene and lost by 1 point on the last play of the game on the road.
I say they lost by 1 second because if
Yeah,
he slides, and
they
if
kicked
you
that field
look at
goal.
that play, because we've been watching it, right? Everybody's been showing that for because of the matchup and everything
Mhm.
like that. You can't watch TV for more than 25 minutes without seeing that play,
Yeah.
right? If you watch that play, once he starts scrambling, he has to kind of like slow down and make a stutter step because there was an official standing there and he was
Yeah.
running and he had to try to get around the official. And I think it kind of threw off his little mental clock timing of when to slide and get down. Maybe that's making excuses or whatever. But
I
anyway,
mean, I don't blame I'm an Ohio State fan, as you know, guys. I don't blame Will Howard for that at all. I know a lot of people at that time did. I at the time was frustrated, like what the hell is he doing? But once I calmed down a little bit, before I went to bed that night, I had made peace with it and had, been like, yeah, it's not his fault.
but as we know, and I'm not here to call out kickers because again, even though I think that fans in the stands can determine NFL games by kicking, and Pat McAfee has shown. We talk about Pat a lot on this show here, but he has shown over and over and over again on College Game Day that kicking is not easy.
No.
But we do know that even if Will Howard does get down and they have the opportunity for that
That
kick,
kick's not automatic.
not automatic with this Ohio
Especially
State team.
especially
So,
yeah, especially at Ohio State.
but
We know it's not automatic. But yeah, so
but
I mean,
yeah, they blew. I mean, again, like I said, Tennessee was not ready. They were
they
not. And
weren't.
I don't think it was the cold, and I don't think it was all this. I think a lot of it was Tennessee. And not, it wasn't so much the players as much as it was the fan base. But I mean, this bravado and the trash talking and the too much, and it was. Well, we're gonna plant the flag, which I think is a stupid thing to do anyway. We're gonna rip down their goalposts and we're taking over. And they had a lot of fans there. I mean, Herb Street was saying that he thought there was like 40%, 30-40%
Yeah,
fans, and
they showed
they
out.
did. They traveled and all that other kind of stuff. But I think there was a little bit like they were too pumped up. And then when they got punched in the mouth, or like Mike Tyson said, everybody has a game plan until they get hit in the mouth. And
Yeah, I
then,
think
you know,
and we can, let's call back to episode 1 of this podcast here where I mentioned that I think that it's going to be too much for Nico, and it showed right away, right? Those first couple drives on offense, granted, I mean that offensive line couldn't block anybody, right? They couldn't block a line of toddlers coming through there, but um you could tell Nico, and because of that, Nico got flustered early. And he
but to his
was
credit, he competed and he played
oh, he
well.
did.
I mean,
Listen, again, I'm not
he's going to be good.
he is
He's
going
going
to
to
be
be
really
good.
good. And I thought we had the same conversation last year in the bowl game against Iowa. We said this kid's going to be something, right? We saw his immaturity at times throughout the season. That against Arkansas, there were a few times we're like, "What are you doing, kid?" But then there were some plays he made against Arkansas. We're like, "Holy smokes, this guy!" But yeah, no. Listen, I still think that Tennessee is going to be a contender for the next couple of years. I think next year, if not the year after, they'll be in the SEC championship. They'll be SEC champions. I think they beat Georgia. They beat Bama in the same season. They beat Texas. I think whether it be next year or the year after, I think that we're looking at the newest powerhouse of the SEC going forward for as long as Nico's there. I just think, listen, this was the first time that Tennessee had been taken seriously in a while, right? They're always a contender because they're the Tennessee Volunteers, right? Their name's always brought up. They're in the SEC. They've beat Bama 2 times in the last 4 years. Like they're always going to be brought up now. But I think this was their first real test with a quarterback who graduated high school 2 years ago, right? Like let's just think about that for a minute. I think it was just, yeah, it was a little too much for him, kind of like SMU. I mean, it was just the stage was too big, the quarterback, but Nico kept fighting. It was what it was. Like I said, I think going forward, Tennessee is going to be an issue for a lot of other teams in college football. But with that being said, those
They got
were,
some growing to do
they
for
do.
sure.
But I
And
think, and I think they will. I think they will.
and to Nico's point too, and I will say, look. I mean, he's got all the tools, right? The kid's 6'6". He's continuing to put on weight. He's got athletic ability. He's got a big arm and everything else. I will say this: one of the things, he had 19 touchdown passes on the year coming into that game. 15 of them were against non-power five opponents like Kent State and those guys early in
Yeah.
the year. Like, so once the competition got, I mean, and I think that there was, I mean, there was injuries to receivers and offensive linemen. And I mean, again, we always talk about that. Every team deals with it or whatever. But, um, you know, eh, look, the eye test says that he's legit.
Yeah.
He's got all the
Oh yeah.
tools and he's got a great attitude, the
Mhm.
whole thing. And everybody was worried about the whole transfer portal and everything. I love his dad coming out saying, I forget the hashtag on there, but essentially it was like calm the fuck down
Yeah.
kind of a
Yeah.
thing. Like Nico's, he said he started out. I don't know if you saw it, but so Nico's dad posts out there. He says, "Yeah, we did apply for some transfer portal paperwork and things like that." He goes, "I have a year of eligibility left, and I wanted to be able to see if I could play O line and slash receiver for Tennessee and stuff like that." And that he's like, "No, Nico's gonna be there." He's like,
Yeah.
calm the fuck down. And it was good. It was funny. I liked it. It was a good way to kind of say, look, we're still all in on Coach
Yeah.
Hype and
Yeah. And I mean,
all
look,
that. So
listen, this is kind of a similar situation that we've got with Ryan Day, right? You, I mean, look what Heupel has done for that program. He's beaten Alabama twice. Now, this is a program that has not beaten Alabama in what, 19 years?
it was 17 years prior
17
to
years?
that win
Right.
3 years ago.
So he's beaten Alabama twice,
Hmm.
right? And like you said, 17 years,
Yeah.
right? And he's brought him to the first playoff appearance. Listen, everybody needs, like you say, calm down, right?
Yeah.
Let's relax a little bit. If you're a Tennessee fan, don't hit the panic button. We're not shouldn't be calling for people's jobs and transfer portals and all sorts of nonsense. Listen, the future is so bright for the University of Tennessee football program. I think they only get drastically better from this point forward. But yeah, man. All right. So I mean,
But
there's your first round.
yeah. At the end
Yeah,
of the day, I mean, it was Ohio State's day, and
yeah.
like I said that Ohio State team wins the national championship. That
If
that
they
team on that
continue,
field beats anybody,
right.
and wins it all. But there was one other game. It was the Texas Clemson game, and Texas looked like the game wasn't in doubt. It ended up being closer. Clemson scored a little bit or whatever
Yeah,
towards the end and kind of made it a little bit closer
yeah.
than that. But again,
Hey, I'll give it to Clemson. They wouldn't go away,
they wouldn't go away. Yeah.
you know. And
Uh,
obviously that's Dabo Sweeney.
Yep.
He knows what he's doing. He knows how to coach. He's brought, I mean, what was it, seven or eight playoff appearances since the college football playoff?
I don't know. I don't have it. I don't have it
Because
off the
well,
top of my head. I'm
Alabama's
not
ahead of
smart enough
them.
to remember something like that. But I know he's been. I mean, he's
Yeah,
he's there.
Alabama's ahead of them by one game. I think
Okay.
Alabama's been 9 times, so that means Clemson has been eight. I mean, come on, right? Granted, you had Deshaun
Two
Watson and
national
Trevor Lawrence, and
championships.
yeah,
I mean, the
yeah,
guy knows how to win, right? But and they just didn't have that team. They didn't have
no,
the team this year. I mean, it was a nice story. Kate Klubnik coming back. He's from Austin,
yeah,
whatever, playoff game, all that kind of stuff. Fine. Texas is good. Texas is
yeah.
good.
And we questioned. I'm not gonna say we didn't. We questioned Texas as a whole, but we questioned them last week in the episode. Who have they beaten? right? I mean, we talked about it. They lost to Georgia twice. Those were the two toughest games. I think this is a good start for them. It's kind of a good push here going in. I mean, now they're going to Arizona State, right? I mean, we expect them to win that game.
Yeah.
So I
As
mean, we'll
much as
see.
we love Arizona State, it's a good story and all that kind of stuff. Cam Scadaboo and all that,
Yeah.
yeah, forks up but it's look, Texas. I mean, the talent level is. I mean, they're as talented as anybody. And Sark is doing a great job coaching. Yeah, you would have liked to have seen a little bit. I mean, they were, a little bit more competitive against Georgia and maybe
Right.
win one of those games or whatever. But they and it took a backup to beat them the second time.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was the backup boost, I always call it, when a
Yeah.
backup comes in and you're like, oh, we didn't prepare for this kid, and now he's doing things we haven't seen, and we've got to adjust real quick, and they could take advantage of that, and that's what happened with Georgia. But yeah, it's I think obviously the right four teams moved on. And
Yeah.
if I'm being honest at this point in time, it's hard for me to say that those four teams don't continue to move on.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So going into that, obviously we both are picking Texas over Arizona State here. Arizona State's had a phenomenal season, right? Big 12 champs. They kind of came out of nowhere. It took us until the end of this year's season. We sat there and we're like, hold on a minute. I didn't realize that Arizona State is sitting here about to be in the Big 12 championship and punch their ticket. We didn't realize it until like week 11 when we're like, hold on. Where did they come from? So they've had a great season.
Just kept winning.
They
Just
just
kept
kept
winning
winning.
games.
They got themselves a bye.
Dilly
Conference,
Dilly
whatever. But
Dillingham is doing a great job. He's got
yeah,
the team. You love to see it, but
yeah. I
again,
think
it's
all in
one of those
all,
situations, just like Tennessee going into Ohio State. This is one of those situations. This is a different
yeah,
animal. That
it
they're
is
Arizona State's playing a team like they have not seen all year long.
right,
Um, so I,
right.
th- I
So you got there, and then we now transition here New Year's Eve. Boise State, Penn State, Ashton Genty, 100 and I think it's 130 something yards away from breaking Barry Sanders' record. Definitely, if you're Boise State, I mean, everybody in the country knows your game plan is give it to Genty, right?
but here's the deal. Barry Sanders did it in 11 games. They played 10 games and a bowl game. He did it in 11 games.
12 games in a bowl game.
No, they played 10 games back in 88.
Oh, I thought you were talking about yes. I thought you were
10
talking about
game
Genty.
10 game regular season Barry Sanders. 10 game regular season bowl game. He had 11 games for that record and
He's
that
actually going on his and
you
now
know
Genty's gonna look to get it in his 13th game, and if he doesn't, if they do beat Penn
it
State,
would be
he'll
his
have
14th
14th
game because
game.
they had
Yeah,
the 12, then the conference championship. This would be his 14th game. He's looking to get it in 3 additional games and everything else. So I get it. It's hard. You can't splice and dice the records and all of that
right.
kind of stuff or whatever. It is what it is. But let's call it what it is. Okay. Like Andy's
Obviously,
in the Mountain West, whereas Barry Sanders was at Oklahoma State in the Big 12 when the Big 12 was Texas and Oklahoma and But
and I
anyway, I
mean,
digress. I digress.
obviously, guys. I mean, you guys know we're Lions fans. We're always going to defend Barry, but yeah, all right. But I mean, all right. Listen, so yeah, you got that. I think outside of Ashton Genty, Boise State has nothing else to offer. Their defense isn't that great. I'll tell you what though, that quarterback, he only threw 3 interceptions on the whole entire season. That's very impressive. But once again, when you're running the ball 90% of the time, you have less room for error throwing the ball there. But I think that front four of Penn State is going to make Ashton Genty's life pretty difficult. I do.
And we talked about it. I mean, we talked about it last week, and that I mean, Boise State went into Oregon and they lost by a field goal.
Mhm.
But the problem is Oregon is a little bit more of that finessey, fast, and it kind of like plays into, a little bit. Whereas Penn State's going to punch you in the mouth. Penn State
Yeah.
is the old school type Big Ten team. We're going to run. We're our front four, our offensive line. It's in the trenches. That's who we are. And Genty and Boise State hasn't seen a team like this. I still said, Franklin is the worst big game coaches in the
Yeah.
in college football, but I don't think this factors in as a big game. I mean,
Right. I
you're
mean, if
playing a
we
Mountain
called
West team, after coming off of playing SMU, and
right, which you
you
could
know,
call that a big game. So, I mean, if we're gonna call these big games, then he's kind of proven that he's got his first big game win, um, there against SMU. But yeah, I think I mean, I take Penn State. I'm sure you're taking Penn State in this
yeah,
game
I got
too
Penn
here.
State. I
Um,
got Penn State again. I got Penn State big, and again, here we go. Let's calming it down a little bit too, again, because if we start seeing blowouts and everybody's going to be like, oh my gosh, or whatever. But but I do think that these games are not going to be,
I think those first two.
yeah, the first
We,
two that we talked about. Now the second two,
right. We've got
we're in for
Georgia.
treats.
Yeah, Georgia Notre Dame. I think that's going to be a fantastic game. And then obviously we already know Oregon Ohio State is going to steal the show. But let's save that one for last. Let's go Georgia Notre Dame here. We talked about Marcus Freeman and what he's building in South Bend. It's been it's been quite remarkable what he's been able to do there, taking over from Brian Kelly, who's a dumbass. Sorry, I'm about to get a little heated. I can't stand that guy. But yeah, no, I mean he took over from Brian Kelly, who's a dumbass, didn't know how to win big games. You want to talk about a guy who can't win big games? He made not winning big games cool before Ryan Day and James Franklin even knew what a head coach was, right? So you got that, and then he just up and leaves on his team after promising to come back and never telling them anything. And the team chose Freeman as their head coach. They said we want him because he was the only guy who actually cared. And here he is doing remarkable things for the university. I love the guy. He's my favorite coach in college football. I wish that Notre Dame didn't lock him down because I wanted him to come to his alma mater, Ohio State, after they boot Day if we don't win the whole thing this year. But with that being said, I think Notre Dame beats Georgia, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why, because Georgia is without Carson Beck. Even if they did have Carson Beck, Georgia's success these past couple of years have not come from quarterback play. It is not. Think about it. Stetson Bennett, right? Carson Beck, Jake Fromm. I mean, these dudes are third strings, that don't even suit up in the NFL, right? So, I mean, it's not from quarterback play. I mean, at least you got your Sam Hartmans, who is QB2 in Washington. Um, and I expect Riley Leonard to get a starting shot in the NFL. But yeah, I think Notre Dame wins this game because their defense is what stole the show against Indiana, right? Yes, their offense put up points, and it was a good game offensively. They went out and jumped out to a 21-0 lead early, and made it a chasing game for Indiana. But that defense of Notre Dame shut out Indiana for most of that game. They were strong. They stopped that run. Their secondary played outstanding. I mean, Notre Dame's defense is a little bit underrated here in this situation. And I think that defense going up against a backup quarterback, with a Georgia team who we've already seen their weaknesses this year against Alabama and Ole Miss. Um, like you say, Notre Dame had the hiccup to NIU, but I, I, I think Notre Dame's a better team. I do. So I think it'll be a close one, maybe even possibly overtime. But I think Notre Dame, squeaks out of that one. Um, and I think I don't think let me take that back. They're not going to squeak out. I think if they come out, they're going to win that game. They're going to earn it. But I got Notre Dame in that game.
Well, I'm not going to rewrite college football's play over overtime rules. We don't have enough time for that, but I'm fine with it. But yeah, you're right. It's Marcus Freeman has done a great job, and like I said, he's an Ohio State guy. Played in the Big Ten, defensive guy, and he knows how games are won, and and in that era how they were won, and it was won by defense and running the football, and that's what they do, and that's what they do really, really, really well. And it's not just the running backs; it's Riley Leonard runs the ball. I mean, whether it's designed runs or he has to scramble and stuff like that. He's sneaky athletic, and Jeremiah Love and this. I mean,
Yeah.
they they're very very tough, and I mean, hell, Freeman might throw a jersey on and run out there for a
Yeah.
play or two. I mean, the
He's
guy
he is he is the
he's
Dan
absolutely
Campbell of college
yoked.
football.
Talk about unbelievable. But he's probably in better shape now than when he played.
He probably
Um,
is.
but
He's the
yeah,
Dan
because
Campbell of college football.
and because of that, like I've got to go. I've got to go with Notre Dame in this one, and um, also because Notre Dame has a week to prepare for a non-Carson back team.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like in that the SEC championship game, Texas, all of a sudden it was like I said, you get that backup bump for a little bit or whatever. But then when you that's why at least the people always like, yeah, the backup. Why isn't he playing all the time? Well, that's why, because
Right.
the team, when he comes in unexpectedly, the team didn't prepare and scheme for him, and it takes a series or two to adjust and things like that or whatever. When you have a week to prepare for the backup, there's a reason why he's the backup, right?
Right.
And so because of that, and with the way that the defense is and how strong the defense is and how Notre Dame, if Jeremiah Love's not busting one for 98
Yeah.
yards,
Yeah.
they're going to methodically move down the field with that running game. And so I like them. And again, I think it's going to be a close one. I think it's going to be a good game, because Georgia is talented, just backup, or not. They're a good team, but I got Notre Dame in that one, and
Yeah.
I think that they're going to move on.
Quick side note, I think Notre Dame is the college version of the Detroit Lions as far as the attitude that the coaches bring and the style of play. I mean, we've seen Freeman throw out some trick plays too, man. I mean, with the fake punts and the flea flickers, I, I, I see a pretty uncanny resemblance there, and I couldn't love it anymore.
Yeah, that's
We
good.
we 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 both I grew up a Notre Dame fan alongside as an Ohio State fan, so Notre Dame will always have a special place in my heart. And when I'm not cheering for Ohio State, I'm cheering for Notre Dame. So, yeah, we both got Notre Dame moving there. So now moving on to the last game of this round, Ohio State Oregon, the most anticipated rematch of this year in college football in the Rose Bowl. Man, I don't. I mean, where do we begin? Right. This is gonna be a game. And it's gonna be close. It's gonna be tough. It's gonna be one of those games, right? Both teams are gonna look to come out and set the tone early. But I mean, I feel like it's gonna be one of those. It's gonna be like it's gonna be a chess match. They're gonna have an answer. Both of them are gonna have an answer for everything, right? We saw the preview earlier on this year. A great game. It was back and forth. Everyone had an answer, and then it came down to literally the last second. So I, I think, yeah, I think we're in for another game like that where it is probably going to come down to the last play, something like that. It just depends, right? Like we mentioned, if the same Ohio State team that played against Tennessee comes out again against Oregon, they win that game, and they might even pull away. But if the Ohio State team that came out against the team up north comes in, then Oregon's going to win by 70. So,
Yeah, I mean
what Ohio
that's
State are we going to get? Which
yeah.
Ryan Day are we going to get? Are we going to get pissed off, chip on the shoulder, job on a line Ryan Day, or are we going to get tuck tail, ego Ryan Day? Which one's it going to be? And as an Ohio State fan, it's frustrating that I even have to ask that question when you have a version of the same team, two versions of the same team that are so polar opposite. It's frustrating. But if we get the same Ohio State last week, they win that game. If we don't, could get ugly.
And that's the thing, right? Like, I mean, so look, I had picked Oregon to win it all
Yep.
last week, and I said Oregon. I think it's their year and all that kind of stuff. But like I said, I mean, this Ohio State team that came out against Tennessee, and some people can say, oh, it was Tennessee, but no, like that was Ohio State. That was Ohio State imposing their will, and doing what we thought Ohio State was. I mean, Will Howard he's a good quarterback. He had a good career at Kansas State. He's a good quarterback. He can run. He's athletic. He's got a good arm. Jeremiah Smith is probably, I mean, not only the best freshman receiver, but I mean that I've seen in. I'm having a hard time thinking of a better freshman receiver
Yeah. I
than
mean,
Jeremiah Smith.
Joel Klatt said that he is looking to be the greatest receiver in Ohio State history. And
He could be the greatest
yeah,
receiver in college football history,
with the way he's been going.
in a
Yeah.
couple of years. I mean, we're talking, his junior year, we'll probably be talking about. I mean, he's got Heisman written all over him. The kid is he's got a good head on his shoulders.
He does.
He's a very, very just a wonderful human being.
He is. He's a good
You
kid.
listen to him talk and everything else, and he's just a fantastic kid, and he's talented beyond belief. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But then you look at that. I mean, like Ibuka, and I mean, then they keep
Yeah.
coming, right?
Yep.
And then you've got Judkins and Travion Henderson, I mean, there's so much talent, which is why it was so baffling when you see what they did. I mean, it was almost like they didn't even show up. And I have a little conspiracy theory behind that. We're not going to get into that, but
Yeah.
maybe we'll tease it for next week. I have a conspiracy theory
Yeah.
about that, and you were like, "Meh." But
At
anyway,
first I was like, you're out of your mind. And then I reread it 3 times and I'm like, hold on a minute.
I tell you.
Just
But
a
anyway,
teaser.
we'll
Make sure you guys tune in
tune
next
in
week.
tune in
Next
next
week,
week.
there's a teaser theory for that game
Yeah,
and the Ohio State loss.
but like I said, that team. I mean, they're so talented. And when the coaches let the kids be the kids, I think that's the biggest thing that we're talking about here, right? Like like Ryan Day and Chip Kelly didn't let the kids be them against Michigan. Against Tennessee, they said, "You go be you," and you know what I mean. And the kids were like, "Okay,
Yeah.
let's do it,"
Oh yeah.
and they ate. And
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 I
and you know,
quickly, I love this version of Will Howard that we're getting. I mean, that like we didn't see this version of Will Howard at Kansas State.
we saw a little bit in
We
the
saw
Big
flashes, but it
12
was never this
championship.
much.
You saw is the battle and what got them. When a couple of years ago when TCU that game against TCU when TCU ended up going and then
Yeah.
they beat Michigan and then got destroyed by Georgia. That Big 12 championship game when Will Howard, Kansas State quarterback against TCU and all that, that was that was some good football. But you're right. It this year he finally showed out,
Yeah.
and again, I think it was just why did it take getting to the play? But again, that goes to the
Again, this
conspiracy
goes
theory.
back
But
to the
anyway, um, but you're right. Yeah, it's he showed he's a lot like Riley Leonard, right? Like
he
I mean,
is. He is.
they're very athletic. They can move. They can you can design a run for them.
But
I
then they
mean
can
they're
also
not
throw it 60 yards down the field over
right,
the top of your safety's head. So
right.
yeah, I mean it's it'll be interesting, right? And then you look at that comparison in the quarterback position. Dylan Gabriel, right? Dylan Gabriel was in the race for the Heisman, but if you look at the numbers on the season, they're identical. Him and Howard. Why was Howard not getting the same? Was it record? Was it I don't know what it was, but when you pull up the numbers from the season, Howard and Gabriel had identical numbers.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with, unfortunately, just like with the rankings that we see that come out, preseason rankings matter. If you're ranked in the preseason, then it takes a lot more for you to move down than teams that aren't ranked to move up and those kinds of things. And I think that when you're a preseason Heisman Trophy candidate, then and you don't do anything to really shut that down or to rein that back in. I mean, you kind of like Dylan Gabriel, like I mean, he was a preseason Heisman candidate and
Yeah,
he had a good year.
he did.
So you're going to continue to be in the Heisman talk. when you got a guy like Will Howard who wasn't in the Heisman talk, has the same kind of year, like you've got to really have a year
Yeah.
to overcome somebody who was already a preseason, pick like
Yeah.
that. But I think that we I
Yeah.
think that we both I think that we both pick. So it brings up an interesting point because
Well,
so
okay, so wait, if you're picking Ohio State,
I'm changing
so
because of
you're
what I
changing
saw.
so you're changing, but you can't, okay, unless Ohio State loses, you can't change it anymore. You can't change it by week.
No, I'm changing it by week.
Well, that you can't do that. Ohio
Well,
State's
that's what
winning the
I'm
whole
doing.
thing. Unless your pick loses, you got to
I
stick to your
understand.
pick.
I picked. Oh, look, I picked Oregon to win it all at the beginning. That was my thing. But as I go week to week to week and picking based on the week, then that's what I'm doing. And listen, I can do what I want. I mean, there's no rule that says
So
that I can't
you
say
can't.
that I think
Okay.
Ohio State's going to win this week. And even though look, I think Ohio State's going to win this week. I don't know who's going to win the national championship
Ohio State.
because I'm going to tell you between the three teams. I don't have enough confidence in Franklin, but I will say these are the four best teams, the ones that won last week and the ones that we all picked to win this week. I think maybe Georgia is better than Penn State, um,
Yes.
but
I'm going to
but I
say
mean
this.
you look at Ohio State, Notre Dame, Texas, and then Georgia probably maybe Penn. I mean, the only reason why I can't say Penn State is because I just have no faith in Franklin
No.
because he hasn't won anything since I think since Obama was president.
Yeah.
But so the seating it's
Yeah.
funky, right?
Yeah, and they've definitely talked about that. They've talked about just seeding it 1 through 12 rather than rewarding conference champs and whatnot. And a bracket came out, a mock bracket that I sent to you earlier, Dad, that was what the bracket would have been had they have just seeded them 1 through 12. And if they would have done that, we would have gotten Boise State and Indiana. This is the first round. What would have happened if they would have just went 1 through 12? Boise State, Indiana, Clemson, Notre Dame, Arizona State, Ohio State, SMU, Tennessee. Now, while I imagine all of those games would be blowouts as well, at least the seeding's fair because then that puts you with Oregon, say Indiana beats Boise, Oregon, Indiana in the quarterfinals, Penn State, Notre Dame, say Notre Dame beats Clemson, Texas, Ohio State, say Ohio State beats Arizona State, and then Georgia, Tennessee. Right now we're getting, Boise State is a 3 seed to me. It's just silliness.
Yes, I understand. Okay, listen, I understand you want to reward a conference champion, and I've long said yes, reward a conference champion. Like if you have like I always said before, like when it was down to four teams or back when it was the BCS or whatever, and there was just they picked the two best teams and whatever. I always said it's hard for me that like if you have an undefeated team that didn't make the conference champion for whatever reason by tiebreakers or whatever, or you have a one-loss team and then you have a two-loss team that wins the conference champion, then you got to favor the conference champion over the team, whether it's if it's a one-loss difference or if they have the same records or whatever. You have to reward a team for winning their conference championship. I
Yes.
believe that,
Yes,
and
but you
and,
also
and I
have
get
to
it.
you also have to
But
look
you
at the
can reward them
difference.
with like they do in basketball. You can reward them with an automatic bid. But so you get an automatic bid. Some of these conference champions that get in basketball, they're a 16 seed.
Well, right,
They're,
because again, when you're talking about football, you're talking about the Mountain West champion versus a runner-up in the SEC. It shouldn't even be close.
But Boise State's an anomaly too. Like I get it.
Are
I
they?
get it's the Mountain West. They've proven in the past that as a Mountain West team or whatever that I mean, look at. I mean, we talk about. I mean, what did Boise State's undefeated in the Fiesta Bowl,
They
right?
are
Like I
undefeated in
mean,
the Fiesta Bowl when they wear the orange helmets and the blue helmets, white jersey, orange pants, and they're going to be rocking those against Penn State.
right.
Honestly, out of all these games this weekend, I think the one trap game will be Penn State Boise. I
Again,
don't think
because
there's a
again, I don't have
chance.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a chance Arizona State beats Texas. I don't think well, Oregon and Ohio State's a coin flip, and so is Notre Dame, Georgia. So if we're talking games that people are like, oh, I think the one game that could flip and surprise some people would be Boise and Penn.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with that because
But I
again, like
think
I
that if
said,
Boise ended up playing anybody other than Penn State, it wouldn't have been.
right.
So
Right. And that's just because again, look, I think they're talented and everything. They haven't shown anything. Like I said, they haven't won a game that mattered. I mean, you maybe say last week against
yeah,
SMU at
I
home.
I don't know. I don't say that at
But
all.
2016. It's the
Yeah,
last time Penn
yeah,
State has won a game that mattered.
yeah. I mean, they think about it. They beat Michigan in a whiteout in 2019.
What I mean, 2019 Michigan was they didn't even have a winning record, right? I mean,
No, they ended up 2019, I think, was the 8-4 year where they ended up playing Florida in the Buffalo Wild Wings Bowl.
yeah, I mean, prior to Connor Stalions, there was that whole,
Wow, this is
the
also
Rich
true.
Rod and the
Yeah.
Brady Hoke and all that, where they just, I mean, there was 20 years there of, I mean, they were semi-relevant in '97 with Charles Woodson when they won a co-championship by beating Washington State instead of having to play Tennessee and Nebraska. But I digress. Anyway, so but okay, so 2019, but then I mean, they haven't beat. I mean, was he 1-5, 1-6 against Michigan? He's 0 forever against Ohio State.
He's 1-10 against Ohio State because they had that win in 2016.
That's what it. Okay, so yeah, and that's what I mean. Come on, So
Yeah, so he's 1-10.
you're talking, yeah. So again, I don't. I mean, streaks are meant to end. They're going to end. I mean, you're not going to go on forever just
Right,
because,
right. I mean, think about
the
it.
past isn't a predictor of the future and all that other kind of stuff. I get it,
Harbaugh
right?
was
Like,
0-7 against Ohio State, and then counter Stallions. But
right. But anyway, but yeah, so who knows? This could be their year, just like it could be the Lions' year, right? Like, you don't know. But, but I would say that it's a little fortuitous that they got
yeah,
SMU in Boise,
Boise
but
State. Yeah, but all
that's why
right.
I say, of the four best teams in this playoff, I think it's Ohio State, Notre Dame, Texas,
Yeah,
and Georgia are the four
I
best
agree.
teams, and then Penn State's probably five.
Yeah,
It,
I
it,
agree. No, I agree. I agree. I think that if you ended up doing a 14 playoff, that's what it would have been.
yeah,
Obviously, no, Oregon would have been.
that's true. It keeps slipping Oregon out of there. Oregon. Well, that's okay.
If
So
I,
you
I'm going
got
to tell you
you.
this, if it was a 14 playoff this year, I think the best four teams would have been Ohio State, Oregon, Notre Dame, and then it would have been a toss up for Georgia, Texas.
Well, then you would have
That
had
would
to go
leave
Georgia because Georgia beat Texas
right.
twice.
So then Texas would have been the 5, Penn State would have been the 6. I think that would have been fair. I don't who's going to
That
argue
would have
with
been
that.
hard. Well, but Ohio State beat Penn State, but see then that's hard though because at least Penn State.
Ohio State beat
But
Penn
I'm glad
State
we don't
and
have to do that.
Indiana. Ohio State beat Penn State and Indiana. They would be in the top 4.
Yeah, yeah,
But whatever. Anyway, yeah, I think it's shaping up to be good here. I think we're gonna get down to the best 4 teams in college football here. But so yeah, those are our round 2 predictions. My national championship does not change from last week. It's still gonna be the Buckeyes. If they lose, then we'll make a switch. But as of right now, like I said, we keep playing like we did against Tennessee. We're running the table.
and I have to wait and see what happens before I can pick my next national champion. But I did say
This
no.
guy
I
over
said
here.
Oregon last week, but I did say the that Ohio State team that showed up,
Yeah.
they hadn't showed up all year.
No.
Seeing that team, if that team shows up, then Ohio State's the best team in the country. They're going to win it all. Um, Outside of that, I think that I'm because again, I think that defense and in the trenches and running the football. I think Notre Dame, is right there.
I think they're a
So
sleeper. They're a sleeper to
Um,
win the whole thing.
yeah, so we'll see. But
We'll see.
all right.
Yeah, I think it's about pretty much all we got for episode 2 here. Um, this the end of football this year, college and pro, it's shaping out to be pretty good down the stretch here. So, um,
Yeah.
a lot
Check
can
us out on
happen.
all the socials and all that other kind of stuff. Interact with
TikTok,
us, do all that kind of
Instagram,
stuff.
YouTube, all that.
Let me know about the new overtime rules for I'm gonna put it together, send it to Roger Goodell. Let me know if you know I've
Yeah, make
had
sure you guys put in the
too many
comments.
high noons
Yeah,
or if I got something going with that because I think that that's a real deal.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and
We'll get a
then
poll going in the comments here. See what you guys think. We'll have clips and everything uploaded to TikTok and Instagram, so you guys can check those out. All the episodes will be here on YouTube. Have a happy new year, everybody. Let's start out 2025 strong, and let's see how these football seasons end, man. It's gonna get good here. So,
yeah, Happy New
next
Year.
week, we'll get updated more into the playoffs for pro and college, but we're gonna have some other stuff to talk about for sure. We're gonna talk a little baseball next week.
Because there was some stuff, some
Yeah.
signings and
There's some
things like that.
signings and
Again, we got
stuff,
to
and
get, yeah, we got to talk baseball. There's been some signings, a lot of talk about, you know, Tigers being all in on a all-star third baseman,
yep,
and
which
I'm just
would
kind of
be
leaving it at that.
huge. So make sure you guys tune in next week. Like we said, Happy New Year, guys. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. And yeah, anything to close us out? Any closing comments?
No, I got nothing.
There it is.
I'll
Man of
sign
many
off with
words.
I got nothing.
Man,
I
he'll
got
take it.
nothing.
He'll take a Dos
And
Equis.
at the end of the day, I don't know shit.
Yeah, well, yeah, you can't even pick a winner for the Natty. So
No, because look at how wrong I was on that. Look how wrong I was. I was like Tennessee, oh, their defense, and then they got smoked. It was
smoked.
87 points in the
I'd say
first
the
four
first,
minutes of the
yeah,
game. Their defense really showed out. I
yeah,
don't know what
that's
the hell I'm
real
talking
good,
about.
real good. Well, all
So
right, guys,
yeah, I'll sign off with I don't know shit and Happy New Year.
go Lions.
Go Lions.